Reborn to the day the temple caught fire. This time, I bolted that courtyard door shut and held it fast. Play the full story in one go. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. The exciting story begins right now. Hot. A suffocating heat wave, mingled with billowing thick smoke, swept in like countless fiery serpents, furiously licking at the meditation halls on the hill behind Xie Yuan Temple. The smell of burning filled the air, the sound of cracking beams echoed incessantly, and all around, terrified screams and cries filled the air. I leaned against the stone pillar in the hallway, my fingertips sinking deeply into the rough crevices in the stone. In my past life, the sky was also engulfed in flames like this. Back then, I was not only the legitimate daughter of the Pei family, but also a female hero praised by everyone in the capital. To save my fiancé, Xie Yuan, who was trapped deep within the burning building, I heeded no warnings and rushed in, wrapped only in a soaked cloak. When that burning beam came crashing down, I used my back to block the flames and saved his life. That fire destroyed half my face and burned away all my pride as a woman. I thought it was a medal of love. So when Xie Yuan was on his deathbed, I expected to hear words of gratitude from him. But instead, he gripped my wrist tightly and, with a hatred so intense it felt like it would shatter my very soul, shouted hoarsely, "Pei Ruyi, the fact that I'm not killing you is already my way of repaying you for saving my life all those years ago. If I could do it all over again, I'd rather have died with Lear in that fire than been saved by you." He hates me. He resented me for meddling, resented me for thwarting his heroic double suicide with Lu Li, and resented me because my disfigured face had become a heavy moral burden on his path to success. "Miss. The fire's too intense, we have to get out of here fast." My personal maid, Xie, tugged at my sleeve, her voice choked with tears. "Second young Master Xie is still inside, but with this fire, we can't even get in." I slowly turned my head and looked at Xie Ping's youthful, unblemished face, a faint, cold smile playing at the corners of my mouth. "Yeah, I can't get in. How did I manage to get in back in my past life? It was through sheer, reckless courage. But now, I looked down at my fingers, as white as jade. In this life, these hands are meant to rule the universe, not to fish a rotten piece of wood out of a burning building." I pushed aside the green screen and walked step by step toward the meditation room engulfed in flames. Through the tightly closed door, I could hear sounds coming from inside. Because the door was sealed shut by the flames, the people inside hadn't yet realized there was someone outside. "Yuan, I'm not afraid to die." It was Lu Li's voice, soft and delicate, yet tinged with a touch of despairing poignancy. "As long as I can die with you, Lear's life will have been worth living. It's just a pity that, though our love runs deep, our fate is short-lived. You're bound to marry the eldest daughter of the Pei family after all." "Don't even mention her." Xie Yuan's voice carried a desperate fervor. "What does she amount to? She's just using her family's influence to force me to submit. Lear, if there's a next life, I'll never let you down. Today, we'll die together, no one will ever separate us." I stood quietly outside the door, listening. It turns out that, in their eyes, my presence was actually a form of oppression. I looked at the rickety door, with a basin of water, which the monk had dropped in his panic, right at my fingertips. If I'd splashed it on the door right then and kicked it open, Xie Yuan might have gotten away with just a few minor injuries. But I just bent down and picked up a heavy door bolt that had fallen to the ground. Then, I calmly and methodically reinserted the door bolt into the door ring. "Since you wish to remain faithful until death, and since you consider my redemption a sin, I shall grant your deep love its wish. In this raging fire, no one can disturb us. We will stand by each other through life and death. Is that not beautiful?" "Miss, what are you doing?" Xie asked, her eyes wide. "I'm helping young Master Xie secure his happiness." I casually brushed the dust off my hand, turned around, and walked resolutely down the mountain. "Let's go. We can't control the fire anymore. Go get the warrior monk to help put it out." I walked very slowly, each step in time with my heartbeat. The glow of the fire behind me lit up half the sky, and Xie Yuan and Lu Li's screams finally rang out. When they realized they couldn't open the door, and that the tragic, romantic double suicide had become a terrifying reality, their romantic fervor vanished in an instant, leaving only their instinct for survival. Help! Help! Is anyone out there? Xie Yuan was frantically pounding on the door from the inside. I turned a deaf ear to it. It wasn't until I reached a safe spot that my legs suddenly gave way, and I pretended to be exhausted and collapsed to the ground. Quick! Quick, save second young Master Xie. My voice was faint, my face pale, and I managed to squeeze out a few tears of genuine emotion at just the right moment. A large contingent from the Pei family soon arrived. My father, General Pei, the man who, in his past life, had ventured deep into enemy territory alone to help Xie Yuan eliminate his political rivals, was now holding me close, his heart aching with concern. Ruyi. Are you all right? Did you get hurt? Father, I'm fine. I clutched his armor tightly, feeling his real body heat. It's just that Brother Xie and Miss Lu are trapped inside, and I can't get in. I'm such a failure. Nonsense. That's a fire, what are you, a young girl, doing rushing in there? Father scolded sharply, though his eyes were filled with relief. Someone, go get that Xie boy out of there. Half an hour later, the fire was extinguished. When Xie Yuan and Lu Li were carried out, they looked absolutely horrifying. Most of Xie Yuan's hair had been singed off, and his body was covered in blisters. His face, which he had once boasted was dashing, was blackened by thick smoke, and there was no trace left of his former air of a noble young gentleman. Lu Li fared even worse. Her leg had been crushed by a broken wooden beam. Although it wasn't broken, it would clearly leave her with a lifelong disability. When the two of them came out, they were still complaining to each other. Why did you push me just now? Lu Li asked, her voice hoarse from crying. Didn't you say you'd protect me? I want to open the door. You've been holding onto my waist the whole time, I can't even use my strength. Xie Yuan's face contorted with pain, and he completely forgot the vow he just made. I sat in a sedan chair to one side, allowing the female physician to carefully examine my skin. The young lady is truly blessed and lucky, aside from inhaling a little thick smoke, not even a single strand of her hair was harmed, the female physician marveled. From behind the curtain, I watched Xie Yuan, who was in a sorry state not far away, with a cold gaze. He seemed to sense my gaze and turned his head. His cloudy eyes were filled with lingering fear. In this life, my face wasn't disfigured. And he, too, was no longer that spotless savior who had received so much from me yet harbored nothing but resentment. Young Master Xie, you've had quite a scare. I lifted a corner of the curtain, my voice as cold as ice. Ruyi tried to rescue you just now, but was forced to turn back by the thick smoke. Fortunately, young Master Xie is blessed with great fortune and managed to escape death. Xie Yuan looked at my unharmed face, and a complex mix of emotions flashed across his eyes. It was the greed that comes after narrowly escaping death, but also a certain indescribable sense of loss. He was probably wondering why this woman hadn't fought tooth and nail for him, as he had imagined she would. But I know this is just the beginning. Xie Yuan, in your past life, you traded your fame, fortune, and power for true love. In this life, I will make you see its true nature, bit by bit, through poverty and pain. Father, I turned my head and took his hand, my tone firm. Young Master Xie and Miss Lu have stood by each other through life and death, a bond so strong that even a raging fire could not destroy it. Ruyi is truly ashamed. As for this marriage, I'm afraid our Pei family is not worthy of such a match. Father was stunned, and the Xie family servants around him were stunned as well. On this scorched earth, I cast my first hook. On the third day after the fire at Xie Temple, rumors in the capital spread like wildfire, becoming the talk of the town during meals and leisure time. What was once a marriage everyone envied, between the eldest daughter of a military family and a talented young man from a distinguished family, has now become a massive laughingstock. Everyone knows that the second son of the Xie family died together with an unknown woman in a Buddhist sanctuary. If the fire hadn't been extinguished so quickly, they truly would have become a pair of lovers in the afterlife. I sat in the Pei family's carriage, my fingertips gently tracing the surface of a yellow deed. This was the deed to the 3 shops in the southern part of the city that Xie Yuan had swindled from my father in my previous life under the pretext of temporary financial difficulties. In that life, my heart and mind were completely consumed by him. I even took the initiative to persuade my father to hand these over to the Xie family in advance as part of my dowry, even though I wasn't yet engaged. Looking back now, I realize I was truly beyond hope back then. "Miss, we've arrived at the Xie residence." Xie Ping pulled back the curtain, her eyes brimming with indignation. I stepped down from the carriage and looked up at the plaque reading Xie Mansion, which had once filled me with such pride. Now, the entrance to the Xie Mansion was deserted, a far cry from the bustling crowds of days past. Mrs. Xie sat in the seat of honor in the main hall, her face alternating between pale and ashen. As soon as she saw me enter, far from showing the slightest hint of remorse, she slammed the teacup she was holding down on the table. The porcelain lid clattered against the rim, producing a sharp, piercing sound. "Ruyi, how dare you show your face here?" Mrs. Xie raised her voice, her tone brimming with reproach. Yuan was burned so badly that he's still bedridden and unable to get up. As his fiancé, you were so preoccupied with saving your own life during that fire that day. Is this the kind of upbringing your Pei family provides, one that values life above all else? As I listened to these familiar and absurd accusations, not even a ripple stirred in my heart. She was just like this in my past life, too, taking advantage of my love for Xie Yuan to shamelessly trample on my dignity. You are quite right, madam. I lowered my gaze slightly, my tone as calm as if I were recounting someone else's story. I know my fortune is meager. I was unable to shield young Master Xie from even a single blow during that fire. Since that is the case, I have come here today to preserve the dignity of both families. Mrs. Xie's brow twitched, and a flash of greed and scheming crossed her eyes. Dignity? If you really want to preserve your dignity, you should go and tend to Yuan's bedside, and have your father summon 2 imperial physicians from the palace. Madam, you've misunderstood. I looked up and met her gaze directly, my eyes cold and piercing. What I mean is, since young Master Xie already has a beloved companion who would follow him through life and death, if I, Pei Ruyi, were to meddle in this matter, wouldn't I become the villain who tears lovers apart? Let's call off this marriage. How dare you? Mrs. Xie sprang to her feet, her voice so shrill it was almost piercing. Pei Ruyi, don't forget, this engagement was arranged by the elders of both families. You can't just call it off on a whim. What do you take the Xie family for? Let's just think of it as a place to take in refugees, I said with a faint smile, shaking out the stack of ledgers and deeds from my sleeve. My father has already written the letter annulling the engagement and sent it to the Imperial Household Department. I've come here today to settle the accounts. What kind of math is that? Let's take stock of the past 3 years, the 10,000 taels of silver that young Master Xie borrowed from my Pei family, as well as those 3 prime shops in the southern part of the city that yield 1,000 jin in annual profits. I slammed the deed down on the table, my voice suddenly turning cold. Madam Xie, these assets were originally entrusted to the Xie family for custody in advance, out of consideration for our status as in-laws. Now that the betrothal has been annulled, these assets must, of course, be returned in their original condition. Mrs. Xie's face instantly turned from ashen to pale. In recent years, the Xie family had been all show and no substance. Xie Yuan's insistence on maintaining the so-called dignity of a scholar had led to enormous expenses, all of which were propped up by the Pei family's financial support. Those 3 shops now accounted for the bulk of the Xie household's income. You gave that to Yuan. There's no way you're taking it back. She shouted in a fit of rage. Madam, you're mistaken. The deed clearly states temporary loan in black and white, and the seal belongs to my Pei family. I turned to face Xie Yuan, who was being helped out of the inner chamber, and said sarcastically, Mr. Xie, as someone who has studied the classics, you surely understand the principle that debts must be repaid, don't you? At that moment, Xie Yuan was wrapped up like a rice dumpling, with ointment smeared across half his face, leaving only a pair of menacing eyes exposed. He looked at me, and a struggle I couldn't fathom flashed in his eyes. Perhaps he hadn't expected me, who had always been completely submissive to him, to act so ruthlessly. Ruyi, do you really have to rub salt in the wound at a time like this? Xie Yuan's voice was hoarse, tinged with a self-important air of superiority. Lear's injuries are worse than mine. She's still unconscious. What we had was nothing more than a fleeting romance that stayed within the bounds of propriety. Why must you be so petty about it? How fitting, let one's emotions be the guide, but let propriety be the limit. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. When you were clutching her in the fire, vowing to live and die together, I suppose all those Confucian classics you've read, young Master Xie, must have gone right down the drain. Since you care so deeply for that Miss Liu, I'm sure you'll be able to earn back the money for her medical treatment and future expenses through your own integrity and dignity. I turned and gestured to the butler behind me, go, reclaim the deed, and while you're at it, settle the accounts for the shop in the southern part of the city for the past few years. If the Xie family still refuses to pay up, we'll see each other in court. I imagine the emperor will be quite interested in a scholar who borrowed money from his fiancé's family to support his mistress. Pei Ruyi. Xie Yuan was so furious he was shaking all over. The movement tugged at his wounds, causing him to wince in pain. Mr. Xie, please stay, there's no need to see me off. I retrieved the repayment agreement stamped with the Xie family's private seal, the one Mrs. Xie had signed with trembling hands under my threat to take this to court. Just before stepping out the door, I deliberately paused and glanced back. Oh, that's right. I forgot to tell young Master Xie that Miss Liu just woke up and is crying because she wants to see you. It's just. The nurse said she might have a slight limp from now on. Young Master Xie is so kind and loyal, surely you won't hold that against her, right? Xie Yuan's expression froze for a split second. A cripple? His true love, who was as pure as a fairy and was supposed to accompany him on journeys through all the famous mountains and rivers, had become a cripple. I stepped onto the carriage using a footstool, no longer looking back at the chaos behind me. The carriage moved slowly along, and while Cui Ping sat beside me, excitedly tallying up the money we were due to receive, I pulled back the curtain and looked at the unassuming clinic not far away. There, Lu Li was lying on a crude wooden bed. She had no idea that the beauty and grace she relied on for her very survival were now a thing of the past, nor did she realize that without the Pei family's vast fortune, her beloved brother Yuan would soon become a down-and-out scholar who couldn't even afford his medical bills. In a past life, Xie Yuan said I ruined his love. In this lifetime, I gave them this love with my own hands, and in the process, stripped away that elaborate facade. I'll just have to see how long this heavenly couple can hold out amid the mundane days filled with the smell of medicine and the stench of money. Let's go back to the mansion, I said softly. Have father replace all the managers at those shops with our own people. Not a single tael or liang of silver must find its way into the Xie family's hands. Winter is approaching, and the wind in Beijing carries a biting chill that stings the face. I was sitting on the second floor of the silk shop in the southern part of the city, which I just reclaimed, holding a steaming cup of snow-topped emerald. Outside the window, the withered trees lining the street were still clinging to a few stray leaves, giving the scene a somewhat desolate feel. But I was in high spirits. Over the past few months, I'd not only reclaimed all the shops that the Xie family had seized, but I'd also taken the opportunity to crack down on those treacherous shop managers in my own household. The Pei family's bankroll had multiplied several times over. As General Pei, my father, looked at the thick ledger, the slight worry he'd felt over the broken engagement completely gave way to amazement at his daughter's talent for business. Miss, isn't that second young Master Xie? Xue Ping stood by the window, pointing to a small pharmacy diagonally across the street, her tone laced with undisguised sarcasm. I followed her finger with my eyes. Xie Yuan was wearing a somewhat thin blue robe, the collar of which was even slightly worn. He no longer bore any resemblance to the Jin Yiwei guard or the dashing young gentleman of days past. Carrying several bundles of cheap herbs, he looked haggard as he humbly spoke to the apothecary's clerk, seemingly begging him to let him buy on credit. "Go and fetch the owner of that shop," I said calmly, setting down my teacup. A moment later, the owner of the pharmacy went upstairs, bowing and scraping all the while. He was a shrewd man and knew full well that most of the streets in the southern part of the city were now under the Pei family's control. "Miss Pei, how may I assist you?" "How much does that Mr. Xie over there owe in medical bills?" "Oh my, it's only 30 taels of silver in total, but he's been dragging his feet for half a month now," the shopkeeper lamented. "He says it's to treat the leg of that Miss Liu in his room, all those expensive medicines to reduce swelling and relieve pain, but the Xie family isn't paying him anything these days, and he doesn't have a steady income of his own." I took 3 silver notes, each worth 10 taels, from my sleeve and gently slid them across the table. I paid his medical bill. The host was taken aback for a moment, then broke into a smile and reached out to take it. "However," I said, pressing the silver note to my palm with a faint smile, "tell him that this silver is a handout from the Pei household, out of consideration for our past friendship. Also, from now on, he's only to be given the lowest grade medicine, so that young Master Xie won't have to worry that his true love can't endure the hardships of living on cheap medicine." Having lived most of his life, how could the landlord fail to pick up on the underlying meaning? He nodded repeatedly and ran downstairs with the silver notes tucked into his pocket. I opened the window and quietly watched Xie Yuan. The employer stopped him on the street, waved a silver note in front of him, and pointed to the second floor where I was standing. Xie Yuan jerked his head up. Those eyes, once brimming with pride, first flared with intense rage the moment he saw me, only to quickly give way to deep shame. He stood frozen in place, like a weathered stone statue. In the end, for the sake of those few packets of life-saving medicine, he bowed his noble head and gave a deep bow toward the second floor. That bow bent not only his back but also the integrity that, in his previous life, he had claimed was unbreakable. "Let's go see how our heavenly couple is doing." I pulled my white fox fur cloak closer around me and got up to go downstairs. Xie Yuan lived in a small, dilapidated courtyard on the outskirts of the city. Mrs. Xie had made up her mind, as long as Xie Yuan refused to cut ties with Lu Li, she would not give him a single piece of silver. To prove his love, Xie Yuan actually moved out with Lu Li, scraping by selling the few remaining accessories he had. The carriage came to a stop in front of the dilapidated gate. Before they even entered the house, they heard the sound of a heated argument coming from inside. "It hurts. Brother Yuan, my leg hurts so badly. Didn't you say you'd be able to invite Master Wang, the divine physician, today?" Lu Li's voice was no longer soft and sweet. Instead, it carried a note of hysterical agitation. "What good are these bitter medicinal dregs? If my leg ends up crippled, how will I ever dance again?" "Lear, please cut me some slack," Xie Yuan said, his voice tinged with deep exhaustion. "The Pei family is pressing me hard for repayment right now, and I can barely even scrape together the silver for ink and paper. Master Wang charges 50 taels for a single house call. Where am I supposed to get that kind of money?" "Consideration? I've given up my reputation for you, living with you in this drafty, run-down shack, and yet you can't even bring yourself to pay for this medicine?" Lu Li cried out. "I can tell you've changed your heart. Are you still thinking about Pei Ruyi? Thinking about the Pei family's great wealth and prestige? What nonsense are you talking about?" Xie Yuan's voice rose as well. "If it weren't for saving you, I wouldn't have ended up in this situation." As I pushed the door open, the first thing I saw was a floor littered with broken ceramic bowls. Lu Li sat on a rickety wooden bed. Her once pure and ethereal little face was now sallow and gaunt, and one of her legs was wrapped in thick bandages. Even so, it was clear that she was in an extremely awkward position. Meanwhile, Xie Yuan was crouched on the floor, picking up the shards. There appeared to be red scratch marks on the back of his hand. When they saw me, they both fell silent at the same time. Pei Ruyi, what are you doing here? Did you come to laugh at me? Xie Yuan jumped to his feet, instinctively trying to hide his injured hand in his sleeve. I casually surveyed this cramped room, which was covered in cobwebs and reeked of mold. It was even more desolate than when I had been locked away in the Xie family's Buddhist shrine in my previous life. It's hardly a joke, I just came to see what love looks like. I sat down on the round stool that my attendant had brought in, and my gaze fell on Luli. Miss Lu, how's your leg healing? I've heard that if this injury isn't properly tended to, it can cause excruciating pain on rainy days. Luli stared at the dazzling fox fur robe I was wearing, her eyes blazing with intense jealousy. It was you. You bribed the doctor to say my leg couldn't be cured. She struggled to lunge at him, but instead tumbled straight off the bed onto the floor, landing in a most embarrassing position. Xie Yuan instinctively reached out to help her, but hesitated when their eyes met. At that moment, I could clearly see a flash of obvious disdain in Xie Yuan's eyes. Without her fame, her beauty, or her graceful legs for dancing, the bitter, resentful Luli standing before him was no longer the immaculate, ethereal maiden he once knew. Mr. Xie, I've come today to inform you that Mrs. Xie has sold me the debt of upbringing you owe her. I took another contract from my sleeve. This mansion is now my property as well. Starting tomorrow, the monthly rent for this mansion will be 5 taels of silver. 5 liang? Why don't you just go rob someone? Xie Yuan blurted out. In a dump like this, even 1 liang of silver is too much. If you think it's too much, you're free to move out, I said, propping my chin in my hand and smiling gently. I just wonder, though, which inn in the capital would dare to take in young Master Xie in this female confidant these days? Xie Yuan clenched his teeth tightly, and the veins on his forehead bulged. Pei Ruyi, are you trying to drive us to our deaths? How could that be? I'm actually doing you both a favor. I stood up and elegantly brushed imaginary dust from my sleeve. Out here in this desolate wilderness, with no one to disturb you, just the two of you relying on each other for survival, isn't this the very state that young Master Xie? No, isn't this the very state young Master Xie has been longing for day and night? I walked to the door, suddenly stopped, turned my head, and whispered to Xie Yuan. By the way, young Master Xie. Yesterday, on my way to the palace to pay my respects to the Empress, I ran into the third prince. He seemed to hold your literary talents in high regard and even asked how you've been. I told him that you're currently lost in the pleasures of the flesh and likely have no interest in entering public service. Xie Yuan's body jolted suddenly. In his past life, it was the third prince's favor that propelled him to the top. But in this life, I've personally cut off his path to the top. I walked out of the courtyard, and once again I heard the sound of breaking dishes behind me, along with Lu Li's screams and curses, which had grown even more intense. The carriage slowly began to move. Miss, where should we go next? Asked Chui Ping. As for the third prince, hasn't Lu Li always boasted that she's stunningly beautiful and exceptionally talented? I leaned back against the soft pillow and closed my eyes. Since she's so desperate to escape her misery, I'll show her another clear path to follow. When true love collides with power that's within easy reach, I'm curious to see how much longer the star-crossed couple can keep up the act of deep affection. In the capital city, though the snow has not yet completely melted, the early spring flowers are already vying for attention with their vibrant colors. The Grand Princess's mansion hosted a banquet to admire the plum blossoms, and all the noble young ladies and talented young men from across the capital gathered there. As the legitimate daughter of General Pei's household, I naturally sat at the head of the table. That silver and red silk cloak, adorned with floral patterns, set off my peach blossom complexion. My appearance was more than 100 times better than that of the withered woman from my previous life, who had been confined to her sickbed day after day. Ruyi, I hear that ever since you called off the engagement, the second young master of the Xie family hasn't been doing so well, has he? The princess sitting next to me leaned in, a hint of mischief in her voice. Someone saw him selling off his family's heirloom calligraphy scrolls on East Street yesterday. TSK, where did all that haughty pride go? I took a sip of the warm fruit wine and smiled without saying a word. Xie Yuan is having a rough time, and this is just the beginning. I've already set the stage for them, and it's going to be a real showstopper. Second young Master Xie is brimming with talent. He will naturally find his place in the world. I looked toward the pavilion in the distance, where the third prince was surrounded by a group of scholars, while Xie Yuan stood humbly on the outskirts of the pavilion, clutching a scroll tightly in his hand, his eyes filled with a desperate eagerness for success. He wanted to make a comeback and, through the third prince's favor, return to that world of glitz and glamour. But he forgot that in the capital, a scholar with a tarnished reputation is worth less than a blade of grass. "Bring her up," I whispered to Cuiping. A moment later, a simple palanquin entered through a side gate. The curtain was lifted, and Lu Li, supported by a maid, limped into view. She had clearly taken great care with her appearance that day. Despite her difficulty walking, she wore a smoky water and 100 flowers skirt that skillfully concealed her disability, making her appear all the more delicate and pitiful, like a willow in the breeze. A faint murmur of conversation rose from the table. "Who is that? How did someone of such unknown status manage to sneak into the crown princess's banquet?" "Shoo, that's the female confidant that second young Master Xie hid in the burning building." Lu Li kept her head bowed, her expressive, watery eyes sweeping the room before finally settling precisely on the third prince. Even in my past life, I knew that Lu Li didn't truly love Xie Yuan, she only loved the wealth and prestige he could bring her. Now that Xie Yuan has become a fallen man, she, like a climbing daughter vine, must naturally seek out a new tree to cling to. "Ruyi, what are you doing?" The princess looked at me in surprise. She once came begging at my doorstep, saying that young Master Xie had fallen on hard times and that she was willing to return to her old trade, to perform a dance for you distinguished guests, just to earn enough money for medicine. I sighed, my eyes filled with compassion. I felt sorry for her, so I asked the Grand Princess to grant her this favor. "A dance? From a cripple?" The crowd's gaze toward Lu Li immediately took on a look of scrutiny and disdain. The sound of stringed and wind instruments began to play. Lu Li struggled to suppress the excruciating pain in her leg as she began to spin in the center of the hall. She was indeed clever. Realizing that the broad, sweeping dance steps were no longer suitable for her, she switched to the Huxian, a dance style focused on swaying the waist. Paired with her tearful, sorrowful expression, it actually evoked a kind of imperfect beauty. Sure enough, the third prince's gaze was drawn to her. He had always loved collecting rare and exotic treasures, including this kind of beauty with a tragic air. But Xie Yuan, standing outside the pavilion, froze completely at that very moment. He watched his true love, whom he revered as a goddess, swaying seductively before the crowd as if she were a plaything, and saw how, as she spun through her dance steps, she kept casting flirtatious glances at the third prince. "Yuan, I did it all for you." As Lu Li finished dancing, she leaned to one side and fell, with perfect timing, not far from the third prince's writing desk, her voice filled with sorrow. Xie Yuan couldn't hold back any longer. He suddenly broke through the guard's blockade, rushed into the arena, and grabbed Lu Li's arm tightly, his face alternating between pale and ashen. "What are you doing? Who told you to come here? Who told you to dress like this and make a fool of yourself?" "Young Master Xie, let go." The third prince set down the white jade cup he was holding and spoke in a displeased tone. "Since this young lady came forward to perform in order to help you, not only are you ungrateful, but you've even spoken harshly to her. Is this the conduct expected of a scholar?" "Third prince, she's my wife," Xie Yuan said through gritted teeth, his eyes red-rimmed. "My wife." I walked slowly down from my seat at the head of the table, my voice clear and steady. "Could it be that you've made a mistake, young Master Xie? Miss Lu's status is neither legitimate nor proper, there were neither the 3 letters nor the 6 rights, nor was our marriage registered with the authorities. Moreover, since you're now even making Miss Lu cover the medical expenses herself, how can you possibly call her my wife? Pei Ruyi. It's you. You're the one who told her to do it, aren't you? Xie Yuan suddenly turned his head and glared at me, his eyes as if they could devour me whole. Young Master Xie, choose your words carefully, I said with a cold laugh, but my gaze drifted to Lu Li standing nearby. Miss Lu, the path you take is your own choice. Whether you return to that drafty, dilapidated hut to endure a life of hardship, or enter this prince's mansion to enjoy every luxury, it all depends on a single decision you make. Lu Li looked at Xie Yuan's face, which was etched with poverty and anger, then turned her gaze to the third prince. The third prince gave her a faint smile, one that exuded the dignity and confidence that come from having long held a position of power. Brother Yuan, I'm so sorry. Lu Li suddenly shook off Xie Yuan's hand and crawled on her knees to the third prince's feet. I beg your highness to save this lowly maiden. I am willing to enter your mansion as a slave or maid, I only ask for a place to shelter from the wind and rain. In that instant, Xie Yuan felt as if he could hear the sound of his heart breaking. That was the love he had been willing to give his life to protect in his past life. Now, in the face of a few tales of silver and power, it had been shattered into nothing but dust. Lu Li! How dare you! I gave up my engagement to the Pei family for you, and I became a laughingstock in the capital because of you, and yet you actually... Xie Yuan roared, like a desperate beast. You're useless! Lu Li suddenly raised her voice, pointing her finger right at Xie Yuan's nose as she let all the pent-up frustration of recent days pour out. You can't give me the life I want, you even have to run up a tab just to see a doctor. All you ever do is talk to me about your ambitions, but can your ambitions buy me a piece of meat? Can they make my legs better? The main hall was deathly quiet. As I watched Xie Yuan's body teetering on the brink of collapse, the pent-up resentment in my heart, accumulated over past and present lives, finally dissipated by more than half. It seems this life and death devotion isn't all it's cracked up to be after all. I walked up to Xie Yuan, leaned in close, and whispered in a voice only the two of us could hear, Young Master Xie, how does it feel? The villain you claimed ruined your love is gone, so why has your love rotted away so quickly? Xie Yuan suddenly looked up at me. The anger in his eyes gave way to terror, as if, in that instant, he had glimpsed some kind of fateful cycle in my cold eyes. Take him away, said the third prince, waving his hand as if shooing away a fly. Lu Li was led away by the eunuch, while Xie Yuan was dragged out like a piece of trash by the servants of the Grand Princess's residence and slammed hard onto the blue stone steps outside the gate. A light spring rain had begun to fall from the sky at some point. I stood on the high steps, watching his back as he fell into the mud. In a past life, on his deathbed, he told me he hated me for saving his life and ruining his love. In this life, I watched helplessly as the woman he loved most dealt him the deepest blow with her own hands. Xie Yuan, this is only the beginning. Your vast store of knowledge, the source of your greatest pride, and the power and wealth you crave most, I will make you watch as they all vanish into thin air. And you will be left to dwell on the humiliation of this moment, over and over again, in the most humble of corners. Miss, let's head back, said Sui Bing as she held the umbrella over me. All right. I stepped down the stairs. The hem of my skirt brushed against the muddy water, yet not a speck of dirt clung to it. We still have a long way to go, so we'll take it slow. The first snowfall of winter fell silently. I stepped out of my father's study, holding a letter from home that had just arrived from the border. In my previous life, at this very moment, my older brother had been surrounded by enemy forces in the freezing snow because Xie Yuan's misguidance in the capital had caused delays in the delivery of provisions and supplies. But in this life, I had taken the initiative early on to use the Pei family's trading network, breaking up the shipments of winter clothing and provisions into smaller batches to ensure they reached the front lines before the Xie family could interfere. In his letter home, my older brother said he had won a resounding victory and would be returning to the capital shortly to receive his title. I looked at the pristine white snow in the courtyard and let out a long sigh. The weight on my heart was finally lifted. Miss, that man from the Xie family. has been waiting at the side gate for 3 hours. Xie Yuan draped a heavy cloak over me, her eyes full of disgust. He says he must see you no matter what. The guards at the gate have shooed him away several times, but he's stubbornly remained kneeling there, refusing to leave, and has drawn the attention of quite a few passers-by. I put the letter away and said calmly, "On your knees?" Young Master Xie's integrity now seems like mud in the snow. The more it's trampled on, the more it crumbles. Let's meet him. We have to make sure he gives up on her for good. When I appeared at the side door, I spotted the figure huddled in the corner at a glance. Xie Yuan was wearing that old, faded long robe. He had grown so thin he was barely recognizable. His legs seemed to have gone numb from kneeling on the ground for so long, and he was shivering uncontrollably. When he saw me again, a glint of near madness suddenly flashed in his cloudy eyes. "Ruyi. You've finally agreed to see me." He struggled to stand up, but, overcome by exhaustion, he fell heavily back into the snow, looking utterly bedraggled. I stood on the high steps, looking down at him from above, while the brazier I held in my hands gave off a faint, pleasant fragrance. "Why go to all this trouble, young Master Xie?" I said calmly. "You're a man of letters. Haven't the classics taught you that one shouldn't go back to pick up something one has cast aside like a worn-out shoe?" "No, Ruyi, I was wrong, I was truly wrong." Xie Yuan spoke rapidly, as if clinging to his last straw, his words laced with nauseating flattery. "Living alone in that courtyard these past few days, I've finally realized that Luli isn't at all what I imagined her to be. She's hypocritical, greedy, selfish. She even publicly humiliated me just to get into the third prince's mansion. Ruyi, you're the only one who's sincere, you're the only one who would try to save me from a burning building, and the only one who would pay my medical bills when I was down on my luck." As I listened to these words, I found them utterly absurd. This is Xie Yuan. When his true love was still a fairy, he was willing to sacrifice his reputation and future for her. But when she became a limping, bitter woman, and even someone else's plaything, he had no qualms about immediately trampling her into the mud and turning away to seek a safe haven to cling to. "You're reading too much into it," I interrupted his wild imagination. "Those 30 taels for medical expenses weren't to save your life, they were to keep you alive so you could watch this great show. After all, dead people don't feel pain." Xie Yuan froze. He tilted his head back, and snowflakes fell on his contorted face. You weren't like this before. You loved me, you were even willing to give up your life to save me." "That was then," I said, curling the corners of my lips coldly. "I used to be blind, but now I've seen the light." "Mr. Xie, I suspect you didn't come to see me today just to confess your feelings. Let me guess, has the Xie family completely cut off your financial support, or has the third prince blocked your path?" Xie Yuan's face turned pale in an instant. "My father wants to strike my name from the family registry," he said, his voice trembling and his face etched with despair. "He says I've brought shame upon our family and that I'm beyond redemption. Ruyi, General Pei is highly respected in the army. If you just put in a good word for me with him, if the Pei family would just give me a helping hand, I could take the exams again, and I could go back to being that high and mighty magistrate Xie." I chuckled softly, my eyes brimming with sarcasm. "Xie Yuan, what makes you think the Pei family would back a good-for-nothing who's been disowned by his own ancestors?" I leaned forward, my gaze as sharp as a knife. "Do you know how Luli is faring at the third prince's mansion? Because she has trouble walking, she startled the third prince's beloved dog while dancing, and now she's locked up in the woodshed in the backyard. She had someone deliver a message to me, saying that her greatest regret is that she didn't let you die in that fire." Xie Yuan's pupils suddenly contracted, and he collapsed onto the ground. "Look, this is the love you're so proud of. When disaster strikes, the first thing you both think of is sending the other to their death. No. It shouldn't be like this," he muttered to himself. "Young Master Xie, I've come to see you today to present you with a great gift." I took a document from Cui Ping's hands and tossed it lightly in front of him. Xie Yuan picked it up with trembling hands. Upon seeing the writing on it, he let out a desperate scream. That was a document from the authorities demanding repayment of a debt. Back then, in order to maintain his dignity, he had secretly misappropriated several plots of farmland owned by the Xie family and used them as collateral with a loan shark. Through my efforts, the creditor had already transferred this debt to the Chasing Ghosts Hall, the most notorious debt collection agency in the capital. That debt, principal and interest, comes to 3,000 taels, I said, looking at him coldly. If you can't come up with the silver by tomorrow, I'm afraid you won't be able to keep your hands. What place does a scholar who can't write have in the capital? Ruyi. I beg you. For the sake of our childhood friendship. He frantically bowed his head, his forehead slamming against the hard bluestone steps until blood soon began to seep out. Aren't you rich? The profits from just one of your shops are more than this. Please save me, I'll do anything you ask. I have no shortage of horses, and certainly no shortage of cows. I took a step back in disgust. All I want is for you to spend every minute and every second of the rest of your long life in regret and despair. Remember this, everything that's happening today is the path you chose with your own hands back then, in pursuit of true love. I turned around and ordered the guards, if he dares to come within 100 steps of the Pei residence again, break his legs and hand him over to the authorities. Xie Yuan's hysterical cries and curses echoed from behind, but they soon faded into the howling wind and snow. Stepping into the warm house, I accepted a cup of hot tea and watched the house martin struggling in the cold wind outside the window. Xie Yuan, this isn't enough. You owe the Pei family, you owe my father and my brother, and this money and humiliation are merely interest. The real reckoning has only just begun. Within a few days, word spread throughout the capital that the second son of the Xie family had had 2 fingers chopped off for failing to repay a debt and had subsequently been banished from the city. Some said he had gone mad, weeping and laughing in the middle of the marketplace while shouting something about rebirth and love. Some say they've seen him among the refugees heading south, filthy beyond recognition, fighting with a stray dog over half a piece of stale steamed cake. And at that moment, I was standing on the city wall. Outside the city walls, the Pei family army, led by my older brother, returned in triumph. The red battle flags fluttered in the wind, and the sound of hooves shattered the remaining snow. My father stood beside me, tears streaming down his face as he looked at his children with deep satisfaction. Power, fame, and family. Everything that those people destroyed with their own hands in my past life is now firmly in the palm of my hand. I looked up at the gray, overcast sky, and the gloom that had weighed on my heart for so long finally vanished completely. Next, it's the turn of that crumbling shell of the Xie family, and that white lotus who's still clinging to life at the prince's mansion. With the arrival of spring and clear, bright weather, the willows in the capital are already a lush, vibrant green. Today is the day my older brother was conferred the title of Grand General of Xuanwu. His Majesty was overjoyed. Not only did he bestow generous rewards upon the Pei family in the Tai Hall, but he also hosted the Baihua banquet in the Imperial Garden and specifically requested that I accompany him. I sat beside my father and older brother, watching the guests clink glasses and pass the wine around the table, and observing the aristocratic ladies who had once gossiped about the Pei family's broken engagement. Now each of them was flashing ingratiating smiles as they toasted me. Miss Pei is truly blessed, with such a brave brother and a steady father. I'm afraid the noble young men of the capital will wear out the Pei family's doorstep. A first-rank noble lady took my hand, her tone brimming with warmth. That Xie family really didn't know a good thing when they saw it back then. They turned their backs on a gem set in gold and went and fawned over a piece of mud instead. I responded with a faint smile, but my gaze was drawn to the third prince, who had just taken a seat nearby. The third prince seemed somewhat distracted today, with a lingering gloom etched between his brows. It was no wonder, a few days ago, the Xie family had been impeached by the imperial censor for tax evasion and the illegal appropriation of peasant farmland, and this had brought to light numerous old scandals involving the third prince's household. Although these matters did not undermine his standing at its core, they had caused him to fall out of favor with His Majesty. I heard there was a bloody incident at your highness's residence a couple of days ago? Someone whispered during the banquet. That's right, it's that Miss Lu who caused such a stir not long ago. She was nothing more than a plaything to begin with, but who would have thought she'd get out of line? She actually stole His Highness's military token and tried to sell it on the black market to get silver for that down and out second young master Xie. In the end, she was caught red-handed, and in a fit of rage, His Highness ordered that she be. The murmuring came to an abrupt halt as the man made a throat-slitting gesture. I lowered my gaze and watched the nectar swaying in the cup, feeling not the slightest bit surprised. People like Lu Li are always greedy and short-sighted. When she saw that Xie Yuan was truly about to be beaten to death, and that the third prince treated her like dirt, she came up with such a desperate scheme. She thought she was saving him, but in reality, she was pushing both herself and Xie Yuan into the abyss. Just then, a commotion could be heard from outside the imperial garden. A guard rushed in and whispered a few words in the emperor's ear. The emperor's expression darkened instantly, and he snorted coldly, outrageous. How dare they cause a disturbance right at the palace gates? Drag them away. Wait a moment. I suddenly stood up and curtsied gracefully before His Majesty. Your Majesty, I dare to suggest that the person outside may have some old grudge against me. If this matter is not resolved properly, I fear it will spoil today's festivities. Please allow me to go out and see what is going on. The emperor looked at me, then at my brother, who stood beside me like a tower of iron, and waved his hand. Go on, girl from the Pei family. Don't let this filth sully your eyes. Holding the hem of my pomegranate-patterned skirt, I walked step by step down the white jade steps. Outside the palace gates, a madman, completely naked except for a tattered piece of hemp cloth, was desperately trying to force his way in. 2 fingers were missing from one of his hands, the wounds covered with twisted, black scabs, and his entire body gave off a nauseating stench. It's Xie Yuan. He isn't dead yet, but he lives a life more hideous than that of a ghost. Pei Ruyi. Come out here. Give me back Lear. The moment he saw me, his bloodshot eyes blazed with frenzied hatred, and he shouted at the top of his lungs, You're the one who ruined her. You're the one who sent her to the third prince's mansion. You heartless, venomous woman. The guard sword sheath slammed hard against his knee, sending him crashing back to his knees in the mud. I walked up to him and looked down at him from above. The stench that hit me made me furrow my brow slightly, but I didn't step back. Xie Yuan, do you remember what you said to me on your deathbed? No, do you remember what you said to me in the burning building? My cold voice echoed off the empty palace gates. Xie Yuan froze for a moment, his eyes clearing for an instant, the fire. I told you, I'd die alongside Lily. That's right. If you both wanted to die together, why is she now being torn apart by stray dogs in a mass grave, while you're still clinging to life in this world? I bent down and said in a voice only the two of us could hear, Xie Yuan, in our past life, you blamed me for saving you and for destroying your love. In this life, I've watched helplessly as you've lost your family, your hands, and your dignity, step by step, and finally, I've watched the woman you loved most die a gruesome death because of you. I watched his pupils contract violently and the muscles in his face twitch wildly with fear. How does all this feel? Who are you, exactly? Xie Yuan's teeth were chattering. The way he looked at me was as if he were staring at a demon that had crawled out of hell. I am Pei Ruyi, I said, sitting up straight, a dignified and flawless smile on my face. I am the daughter the Pei family takes pride in, the matriarch of a distinguished family who will one day be immortalized in the annals of history, a deity so exalted that even a single glance from a lowly worm like you, wallowing in the mud, would be considered blasphemy. I turned my head and ordered the guards, this madman has insulted the family of an imperial official and disturbed the imperial procession. Take him directly to the prefect of Jingzhao's office. Let him be sentenced according to the Great Code of Laws. No. Ruyi! Ruyi, save me! In that split second, Xie Yuan seemed to finally come to his senses. He realized this was his last chance to survive and frantically reached out to grab the top of my shoe. I took a step back, and the guard's spear precisely knocked his hand aside. He was dragged away like a dead dog, leaving a long, filthy trail of water on the ground. When she returned to the 100 Flowers banquet, her brother came up to her with concern. "Ruyi, did you take care of it?" "It's settled," I nodded, beaming. From now on, Xie Yuan no longer exists in this world. The banquet went on late into the night. Moonlight bathed the corridors of the Pei residence, and everything seemed so peaceful and beautiful. My father, slightly tipsy, was holding my brother's hand and rambling on about his heroic deeds in battle at the frontier back in the day. I sat alone in the garden gazebo, enjoying the refreshing feel of the spring breeze on my face. That great fire from my past life seems so very far away now. My face no longer bears any scars, my heart is no longer clouded by sorrow, and my family is no longer a line of loyal martyrs who met a tragic end. I know that there is no longer a Xie Yuan in this world, nor a Pei Ruyi who humbled herself to the dust for love. "Miss, it's time to rest." Cui Ping walked over, carrying a bowl of soothing soup. "All right." I stood up and glanced at the morning star rising on the horizon. This life has only just begun. My life will be filled with boundless glory. I will be surrounded by my children and grandchildren, and I will enjoy a long and thriving life. As for the person who once brought me nightmares, he has sunk forever into darkness, with no hope of redemption. This kind of fulfillment is the ultimate revenge. I walked into the inner room and blew out the last lone lamp. In my dreams, there are no more flames. That's the end of the story. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, like, share, and comment. Thank you.